Welcome to Something from Nada, the only podcast designed to explore entrepreneurial stories of determination, focusing on first-generation immigrants and underserved leaders. In each episode, we'll introduce you to the unlikely changemakers, shattering intergenerational cycles as they defy the odds to build something amazing from nothing. My name is Nada Ahmed, and I'm your host. Today, I'm excited to have with me Donna Cole, a lifelong entrepreneur from our very own Houston, Texas. Her story is truly magnificent. At the mere age of 27, as a single mother, she decided to jump ship from her very secure job and start her own company called Cole Chemicals. In 2009, Houston Women magazine named Donna one of the Houston's 50 most influential women. Her story is truly fascinating, and you will love hearing her leadership stories, how she's hired the right people for her company, how she focuses on growth and developing her employees, and how she's used her success and influence to continuously give back to the community. In fact, my conversation with her was so inspiring that I'm going to bring her back on for part 2. Stay tuned for that, but for now, let's dive in. Hi, Donna.
Good morning. Do I say good morning, or just say hello?
You can just say hello.
Okay.
Yeah, we can start with hello. I'm so excited to have you here with me today. You started Cole Chemicals at the age of 27 when you had recently been divorced. You had a 4-year-old daughter, and this has been, I've seen it in many interviews that you've given, this has been stated in your bio, that you only had $5,000 in your savings.
Right.
And I go back to that moment because so many people, moms and dads, would be in that situation and they would want to not take many risks, right? Because they were like, why don't I just stay in my job, get that monthly paycheck? And I am a lone single person responsible for my child. What went through your head? How did you convince yourself that you were going to go for it?
Well, I really didn't want to be an entrepreneur or be in business for myself. You know, that was not a goal. So it just happened. So I worked for a company in the chemical industry for 4 years, and it was my customers who asked me to start my own business. So I had to take a step back to say, why? Right? Why would you want me to start my own business?
Yeah.
And to find out that they had a need that needed to be fulfilled. So they had government contracts that were in excess of $500,000, and they needed to buy from minorities and women. And so
and this was in 1980.
1980. Well, it actually started in 1975 with President Nixon. Yeah. Even though he's a Republican, and he saw that the government was the big purchaser in the United States, right, of all things. And he said, we need to bring small business into the economic fold of this. So big business can't always have all the business. So he said, if we do business with you as a large company, and you have a contract with the government over $500,000, then you should be having 5-10% of your business with minorities and women. Right? Wow. So that was the impetus for starting the government to do business with small business, right?
And you were a product of those policies.
Well, they asked me to start my own business so that I could get certified as a minority and a woman-owned business, so they could count my dollars that they purchased from me, right? Because they were already doing business with me. They already trusted me, but they did give me some rules, some guidelines, right?
Yeah.
So it was, we're going to help you, but you have to have a commitment to grow the business. You have to put iron in the ground. You have to hire minorities and women, and you have to give back to community. Right?
And this is the customers telling you?
This is my customers. This is Exxon and Shell and Monsanto and DuPont and, Arco. I was like, wow, okay, well, and I didn't have enough faith in myself that I could do this, right? Because my goal wasn't to own my own business. I was working for a company. I was doing well. I was vice president of sales. And then I had a mentor who was also in the industry that we were buying and selling chemicals with. And I just told him, I said, hey, look, my customers want me to start my own business. And I used his words. He says, so do it. What's stopping you? And I said, well, I've never owned a business before, right? He said, but you know the products, you know transportation, you've handled a fleet, you do the financials, right? You do the invoicing, you do collections. So what more? I said, but I don't know the legal aspects. And he says, that's easy. You just file with the state, get a lawyer, pay the fee, get your federal ID number, and start doing business.
Yeah. So you were aware of like your blind spots. You knew, okay, this is stuff I know, but there's a lot of stuff that I don't know because starting a business, you have to wear all types of hats.
Yes.
You know, you don't only go in there with, you know, these are my strengths. I can do this. I can sell product. I know the product really well. But the legal aspect, the financial aspect.
Where am I going to get more money?
Yeah.
Right? So my first 2 months in business, I did great. I worked out of a friend's real estate office. And I also was aware that I couldn't call it, so my maiden name is Fujimoto. I couldn't call it Fuji Chemical or Fujimoto Chemical because there was Japan bashing going on at that time, right?
At that time in 1980.
Yeah. So my word out to the public is if you want to start your own business, understand the dynamics of not only your own industry, but what's going on, you know, in the world, in your own area, and the economy, right? So at the time, there was so much Japan bashing going on that there was no way I could call it Fuji Chemical. And as you know, I had a 4-year-old daughter. And, you know, for many mothers, they take their maiden name back. And then the child is left with, well, who am I? Because now I have a different name than my mom.
So you decided to keep your
So
married
I kept
name.
my married name, Cole, and you know, so it's Tammy Cole is my daughter's name, and so I think those are some
Strategic decisions.
Yeah,
You have to make, right? What's good for your business in the long term?
you had to be a visionary.
To be visionary. And it's unfortunate that we have to keep in mind that, oh, we can't give it that name because that's a Japanese name, and there are some biases around that, right? But at the same time, you're being strategic, like what's going to be good for your business and keeping that in mind. And then once then you are successful and you get to make this into established business, then you can use that position to change the system.
Yeah, and now I do, instead of Donna Cole or Donna F. Cole, I have it now, Donna Fujimoto Cole.
Yes.
Because that is who I am, right?
And you've
That is my
earned it.
nationality
Yeah.
from my grandparents. Even
Yeah.
though I'm third generation American and I was born here, right?
Yeah, and you know, and when I was researching and reading about you, and I understood that that was important to you, your heritage, where you came from, and you talk about how your dad was a U.S. veteran. He served in the Army. Was that in World War
World War II.
World War II? And I'll admit, I came to the U.S. as an immigrant, and I've never really studied American history the way people have here. And I started reading about what happened to Japanese Americans after World War II, the internment camps, where over 100,000 Japanese Americans who were sometimes second generation born here, but they were put in these enclosed camps that were almost prisons from the west side of the country. And I was wondering, how has that impacted you as a third generation Japanese American?
Yeah. So my family had already moved to Colorado. So Governor Carr at the time, when Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, and there was the presidential, Roosevelt said we got to move all the Japanese that are on the West Coast inward into camps, right? And people lost everything because you could only take a suitcase. So you think about it, what would you take? And as a child, you had to leave your pet behind.
Yeah.
Right. But so we were already in Colorado, and Governor Carr had some moral courage. You know, there are people out there who will support and defend others. So you have victims and you have bystanders who'll just watch, and you have people who will be rescuers, right, from those who are assaulting, right? So in that, he never got reelected because he invited Japanese to Colorado to farm the lands, to own their own businesses there, and to grow their families.
He was ahead of his time.
He was, and quite interesting. So we had people from California come, stay, with our families and help farm. So that was good. But we did have other people who, families that we know who were interned. I don't know if you know Glen Gondo here in town. They have the sushi kiosk in the H-E-B stores.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And his aunt died in the Santa Ana racetrack. Right. She was pregnant and giving birth, and it was unsanitary conditions, and she died. We had others. His wife, her uncle, was in the 442 like my dad, but he was sent to Europe, and he was killed in action. So that was my saving grace when I look back in my history, and being bullied as a child, because I grew up in South Texas. We moved when I was 6 months old to South Texas. So you were either white or Mexican, or if you were in between, different. If you were black or, like me, Asian, you didn't fit in and you got bullied. So, I hid underneath the teacher's desk at recess. And then I couldn't wait till show and tell to take my dad's 442 Army book to school to show he was a U.S. citizen in the Army for the U.S. side, and that I was an American citizen. So who knew that 40 years later, I would have a successful chemical company, that I would have made enough money to be able to support the Japanese American veterans getting the Congressional Gold Medal, working with a lot of people across the country to make that happen. Right?
Yeah, I saw that. That was Obama giving them those Congressional Gold Medals.
Yes.
A picture of, and you being there, being able to allow for that to happen.
Yeah, so it's about a 3-inch round medal, and it's of gold. So of course it's precious, and it's priceless. But I thought, silly me, I thought all of the veterans were going to get one. Yeah. But they get a replica that's made out of bronze. Okay. But they weren't going to get one. And I said, oh no, that can't happen. Yeah. And so Bob and I bought all the veterans one so that they could have one.
Wow.
And it was so we took the medal around to 7 cities across the country where we had our veteran board members, supporting it in their city. And there was this one little guy, because these little Japanese guys were so small, and he made a bevel around that medal and was wearing it on his neck. It was so cute. Yeah. But so God has ways of working with you, sending you messages and signs along the way.
That story is so inspiring, right? Being bullied as a kid and having to prove that you were American, that you were more American than many of the other people out there because your dad served in the Army. And, because I'm sure some of the Hispanics there were not second, you were your third generation.
Third right.
generation, or your third generation. And how do you think that mindset, right? Because that stays with you, of always having to prove yourself in a country that's yours because you don't know any other. You haven't lived anywhere else.
Well, I don't think I'll ever be accepted as this is my country, right? So when I went to Japan, when I was 55 years old, I was part of a Japanese American leadership delegation with the U.S. Japan Council. And their whole mission was to take Japanese Americans who have never been to Japan to Japan, to meet government officials, academics, business leaders. And so when I went there, just the way I dress and I walk and my hair, they knew I wasn't Japanese, right? And here you look at me and I'm not American.
No. Yeah.
So I felt like I didn't have a country.
Yeah.
So on the plane, I had decided, oh gosh, I was tearful, crying, thinking about, oh my God, this really hit me hard, right? I wasn't them, I wasn't them. So then I decided, well, maybe what I could do is help bridge those relationships between the two countries, to help the Japanese learn more about Americans and Japanese Americans, but also, here in America, teaching people that we've been here for 3, 4, 5 generations.
Yeah. I mean, and I tell people when they sometimes say that to me, like, I'll never be accepted as an American, we have to also take that, claim that and say we are Americans, because that is America today. It's a melting pot. You've grown up in Texas,
Sure.
and Houston is one of the most diverse cities in the United States. And what is really to be American?
Yeah, so hashtag I am an American.
Yes.
So I would love for more people to do that.
Yes.
Right.
I am an
and
American.
take a picture
Yeah.
and post it.
Yeah, let's
and
start
share
that.
it.
Let's start that campaign, you and me, right here.
Well, you
Yeah.
know, we did it
Yeah.
back when we were doing the Congressional Gold Medal thing, because there were so many people who didn't believe that there were any Japanese Americans in World War II, or all of the great things that they did. Even to this day, the 442 and the 100th and the Military Intelligence Service of the Japanese American soldiers in World War II are still the most decorated of all military service or units for their size and length of service. More Purple Hearts, etc. So that just goes to show how loyal they were
Yes.
to a country who wasn't very loyal
Well,
to them.
in return.
And now I've learned same thing with African Americans. They were segregated battalions too. There was a 761st Tank Battalion who liberated Jews out of the camps and subcamps of Dachau. Japanese Americans did the same thing with their 522nd Artillery.
Yeah.
Now I just learned that Mexican Americans fought also in World War II.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it really goes to kind of challenge our perceptions of like what we perceive, people who are immigrants and how loyal they easily become to the U.S. because often they're coming to this country because they're escaping something, because they want that freedom that they didn't have in those other countries. And, I, for one, came here and I embraced the freedom I have here versus living in Pakistan as a woman. And of course, we can make this country better, right? So the criticism of like people criticizing the U.S. Because then you're not considered you're patriotic enough. It's because we care about this country. We believe that its ideals, its constitutions, really need to be lived up to, and we want to be part of making this an even greater America than it is today.
Yeah. Because everybody's an immigrant here except the Native Americans.
Except of the Native Americans, yeah.
Yeah.
So tell me then that journey of figuring out, you had those mentors around you. One, you had the support of a lot of people now in a startup. They have to go out there trying to prove that there's a market, that there's a product market fit. But here you are, your customer's already saying, we need this. There's a government policy that we need to buy these many products from minority women-held businesses. And so that's already going your way. You know there's a market, and your customers are coming to you. And that's very rare for startups to have customers already there. Then you go to your mentor, and your mentor convinces you that, you know what, you can learn about everything else that you don't already know. And your first 2 months were great.
Yes. Excellent. Until the supplier says, you need to pay cash for the next tank car of chemicals that you buy or the next truck that you buy because we don't have any more line of credit for you, right? So I had a line of credit up to a certain point based on my reputation in the marketplace. But after that, when we wanted to buy more product, it was, no, you can't. You need to pay for the last one because we're not going to raise your credit until, you can prove some more in your growth.
This was a supplier.
This was a supplier, right. And so I had to take on some investors who gave me a line of credit at the bank and gave me also a working partner. And that worked for another 2 months. And I was over the hump. And at the time, it was only a $125,000 line of credit, And so by November of that year, I bought them all out. right? And so back on my own 100%, and then rocking and rolling, and then I needed to borrow money. But interesting enough, I wanted to pay cash for everything, right? I didn't want to borrow, and I didn't want to have to pay somebody back. I didn't want any debt on my books, right? I wanted to have good cash flow. So it was important for me to know every day what we were invoicing, so I knew if it was the 25th day of the month that we were able to pay all our bills, right?
It seems like you had this intuitive need to not get the debt, and that translated really well into what most CEOs need to be very good at is cash flow, right? Because that's where you fail.
That was the first rude awakening, was cash flow, right? And that you had to not only invoice properly but timely to be able to and then collect the money, right? Because as they say, the sale's not done until you collected the money. So that was always very important along the way. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs, when they start out, they're like, oh, well, it'll come, or people will invoice, they know they owe the money. No, you really do have to call.
Exactly, and set a process in place to collect, right? Because people forget, they're not thinking about your business. They're thinking about their business. And I wonder if today, because we're not used to using cash, we're a generation that's grown on plastic credit cards, we're used to taking on debt, that it doesn't come so intuitively to us that you got to keep your eye on, do you have enough cash in the bank? Have you loaned too much? Have you now spent too much?
Right.
That you can't pay the paychecks of your company.
And then there's a lot of organizations. People say, well, gee, what organization should I be a member of, right? And so you really do have to do some serious thinking these days, because it could be $200 here, $500 there. But the other is these apps, right, that can help you with your business. But at the same time, at the end of the month, you look at, $45, $50, $100 every month. And that adds up. And are you really getting value out of those apps or not? Right? Because sometimes you put on an app because somebody says, hey, this is great and this is what I do with mine, right? And you'll do it, but then you realize later, oh my God, I'm paying for this every month, right?
Exactly, yeah. So how, I had a question here about your company, Cole Chemicals, when it was at its peak, and I guess, I don't know if that's now, or I know you've sold part of your ownership.
Right. I sold 40% in 2021.
2021? Not so long ago. Yeah.
So, I could be more working on the business instead of in the business.
In the business, yeah.
And the peak was probably 2000 and I'd say 6. 5 and 6. We had, at that point in time, we bought another business in Michigan. We had our warehouse in Houston, another manufacturing facility in Michigan. We were at 49 employees, and growing up to 90 million, So I really did want to grow a lot more than that. But we had a customer who decided not to do business with anymore because they were bought by another company, and the company who bought them had their own suppliers.
Okay.
And so they stopped doing business with us, which really hurt a lot because we had to lay off 11 to 14 people during that time. But I also learned a lot too, because I was at a point where I was flying all over the United States to see customers, to see suppliers, to go see the other business. When you get to a point where you don't know what car you're driving and what hotel room, and you have to say to yourself, geez, is this what I want? Is this satisfying me? I used to try and kill myself and get a 6:00 a.m. flight and then a midnight flight back to someplace else. And I had decided at that point in time that, oh my gosh, I'm really doing this for my ego? Or am I really doing this because we're making that much money and I'm being able to hire people and do all the right things for them, their families, and community, right? And then what about me?
Yeah, because life is just going to go by.
Oh, it did.
Mm-hmm.
It did. And, we were at a point, too, where I'd go to Amos Tuck School of Business in the summers, right, for an executive ed program. And there was a case study done on coal chemical. So I'm in a room full of MBAs, right, and they're going through the company's information on and, they said, you should be at X millions of dollars, pick a number, 500 million. And you need to go borrow money. Right? So I'm like, oh, well, that's interesting. They said, because of your cash flow and you're a cash cow, you can borrow money, hire people, train them so that as your company's growing, then you can start paying back all this money, right? And grow exponentially. So we did that.
Yeah, you did.
For a while.
Okay.
And then I realized, oh, my God, who am I? Because at some point you identify with your business or your work or your company, and not who are you.
Yeah. So who are you?
Oh, I'm a woman who loves to give back and to create connections and watch others grow. Right. So whether it's in business or not. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's been, I guess, part of your philosophy as a leader at Cole Chemicals. Tell me how that's played a role in, how you've led and how you built the company.
I think between the Asian Women's Leadership Institute, APALI, and then I went to several other leadership organizations, it actually helped me in thinking about human effectiveness and human effectiveness training and what we should do within the company. Right? Because if they're great employees and I can deliver a great trainer and they can learn skills, but also something that would help them as a human being, they can take that home, right? They can take it to their community. They could take it to church or wherever they go, temple, and be a better person. And through American Leadership Forum here in Houston, I learned that we could collaborate as leaders, you and I, find some synergies and work on projects together for the greater good.
And how was that important when you were hiring people? How did you recognize that these were the right people for your company?
Yeah, so we did a lot of testing. So we had an aptitude test. We had some other personality tests for a fit for the job description and what the tasks were and some experience. So there's some really good Omni profiles out there. Yeah. And we use them. They're fantastic. They will tell you it's a marginal hire, conditional hire, don't hire, hire. Yeah. They will do a comparison with other people within your company who you feel are stellar employees.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
And how to manage this person with their hot and cold buttons.
Yeah.
Which is very awesome. And the times that we went against it, we were sorry. Yeah. But, you can convince people in an interview, that I'd be a good hire and da-da-da-da-da. But this Omni Profiles was so on target.
Was it? Yeah, because that's my issue with interviews. Is like everyone can put on a face and it's just, 1 hour interview and you can have 5 of those. But do you really know the person? Do you really know how they're going to show up every single day at work? And also, with this whole DEI thing, it's also, we talk about having diversity in the workplace too. So not only just hiring people who look and behave like everybody else in the company, but who think differently, because sometimes you need that in your company.
You have to have it.
Someone who challenges you. But then they're often, labeled as disruptive. How do you deal with people who are disruptive?
Yeah, so you do have to have different thinking styles, right? So we go through this program called Human Brain Dominance. So it's 4 quadrants of the brain. We all have some of it, but there's other areas that we have a preference to work in, whether it's being a visionary or analytical, or you want to just plan and do it, or versus you're a touchy-feely type of person, right? So there are jobs for everybody, but what we found is our senior managers were high preference in 3 of the 4. So 3% of the population are all 4 high in those areas.
Oh, wow.
Only 3%.
Wow.
But imagine if you had somebody who was 3 or 4% high preference, then you're almost a whole brain by yourself, right? But that says that they can look across the aisles at different people and their strengths and be able to bring them into the team and get the job done, right? And be highly successful. And that's what we want. So, yeah, there can be disruptors, and sometimes they're way, way high preference in an area that it is a double-edged sword, right? So let's pick analytical. You can be so analytical that you're just super fantastic, but you also cannot get stuff done.
Yeah.
Right, because you keep looking,
paralysis.
right?
Yeah.
Looking and looking and looking, and somebody has to tell you enough, right? But the work that they give you in that area is super. And maybe somebody like me just couldn't get to where they are. But it's a matter of helping people understand their strengths and getting them to work on those strengths, and not try and work on those areas that they're not good at, because they could improve them a little bit, but they're never going to be as high and as good as their preference that they like to work in.
Yeah. So what is your preference? What are your strengths that you really honed in that's made you successful?
Yeah, so mine are the visionary piece, analytical, and the get it done. So,
you're quick to make decisions? Or
pretty,
like you can make decisions? Because some people, like you said, they think too much.
Yeah. I can pretty much do that. And my mind travels sometimes too fast. So you can tell in a meeting when you're talking too fast and you're taking the strategy too far where people don't understand, right? And they're still processing, but maybe a couple other people have tagged on to what you're thinking, and the meeting dialogue is just moving way too fast for those other people, right? So you really do have to recognize that other people aren't along with you and bring them along. You have to stop and say, okay, this is what we're talking about. Do you have any questions? And go around the room and ask everybody. Because what you don't want is for somebody to sabotage your new strategy.
Right. You have to get the buy-in.
Yeah, because there's a lot of, in the old days they called it water fountain talk, right? But I think it's just hallway talk and chatter.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can ruin a good strategy.
Right.
Or slow it down.
Yeah. Yeah. So if people have any concerns or they don't understand anything or any misunderstandings, like give them that space to bring it up.
Yeah. So, I mentor a lot of people. And one of the things that I make them do is to go buy this book, Discover Your Strengths Now. And it's by Marcus Buckingham and Don Clifton. And the reason I do that is I make them go online, get the new book, take the survey, and feed back those 5 top strengths, right? And then read the descriptions, and then go to your friends and your family and your coworkers and say, hey, I'm doing a little human effectiveness training in my leadership. Do you think these 5 are me? And if you think they are, have you witnessed me using them, and how and what projects or events, etc.? Right? So that gives you confirmation of really who you are and how you work. But then I ask you to cut your life up in elementary school, middle school, high school, college, career. Where did you receive any recognition? Where did you achieve an award, right? Or a certificate? Or you had a goal and you achieved it? And look at those 5 strengths and say, oh, I used these 3. Oh, I used them all.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So now you have a better picture of how you tick, right? And so going forward, you can be more purposeful in your life in getting things done. right? By using those strengths. And whatever goal, whatever project it is, whatever you want to do, business, right? Strategy. And then I tell them to read that there's 34 strengths.
Right.
What are the bottom 5 that are definitely not you?
Yeah.
And then what's the next 5 that you think are you, right? So for me, my top 5 were achiever, arranger, ideation, right? Innovator, learner, and multi-relator.
Wow. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So if I look at my life and I look at what I've been doing, it's like, oh my God, I've been using all of this.
Yeah.
And part of it, I'm a Girl Scout. Once a Girl Scout, always a Girl Scout.
Yeah.
But and I look at that and I think, oh my gosh, we would plan a trip. Okay, so from there you have to decide how many days, where you're going to go, how much food, what are you going to eat, and then do a caper chart with who's going to do what jobs. But you have to go to the store, you have to buy all this. So all of that is, the strategy, right? The plan. How are you going to make it work? And then, you're successful at the end of the day.
Yeah. So it's like being able to plan in advance, and not, just having everything in place, knowing who's going to do what, having everything prepared. And that's kind of a skill you learned by being a Girl Scout.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it translates well into your working life.
Into business.
Right?
And from listening to you talk so passionately about like people and their strengths, your company is a company within oil and gas, energy, chemical company. You would think like the expertise you need are very technical. How do you think, you've balanced like that technical side of the business to the leadership, the communication side of business, to actually making it a company that is cohesive and sustainable?
Yeah. So one, we talked earlier about watching trends, right, and what's going on, so that you can position yourself where you need to be at the right time, right? So we've been able to do that through the last 43 years. Instead of going bankrupt. I mean, there were a couple of times that I thought, oh my God, we're going to go bankrupt, right? COVID was one.
Yeah.
That
was
energy crisis,
recently.
84, 86. So can you pivot, right? Can you be quick? Can you cut costs quick? And I realized when we had to cut people back in 2004, 2006, the attorneys will tell you, you can't say you're sorry, right? Because you're putting blame on yourself. Which really,
responsibility.
Which really hurt a lot, because I was sorry, but I knew it wasn't my fault, right? And it took me a while to finally figure that out. But on one hand, you feel like you're a failure, because I did go to Detroit and I said, no, we can do this business. We know global companies, so we can be global enough for you, right? But that wasn't it. The thing was that they had their own suppliers that they were going to do business with, and it didn't matter who I knew or what I did, right? So that took a while to understand that. But you do have to listen to your lawyers, right? Because they will tell you that you can't be sued.
Thank you for listening to the Something from Nada podcast. Hey, you made it this far. Give us a like and follow. If you'd like to learn more about how you can be a guest, a sponsor, or want to learn about my book, Determined to Lead, head to my website, www.nadahmed.com. That's www.nadahmed.com. Thank you.